Perfect, thank you. Apologize for the slight delay there. Okay.
Morning, Cap. How are you, Sean?
Everybody's ready. We'll go ahead and call to order the meeting of the Joint Organizational Governance Committee and the Board of Retirement and Board of Investments. This is a special meeting for Friday, May 28th, time at 9:02 a.m. Second item of business is the approval of the minutes of April 22nd, 2021. I'll need a motion for that.
Thank you, Chair Kehoe. And for this, we will also spell out the acronym of CEM, which is Cost Effective Management, on the minutes. And so now we may proceed with the motion.
Got it.
I'll
And you
move
know,
as amended.
Second.
and then Bonnie, before we get started, did you need to do the official?
That would be great.
Okay,
Thank you
sorry,
so
let's
much.
hold off on the vote and let's go ahead and do the official opening.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Kehoe. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and take a roll call of the trustees, as this is a virtual meeting. Trustees sitting on the Board of Retirement and Board of Investment, Mr. Santos,
Present.
Mr. Bernstein,
Here.
Mr. Knox,
Here.
Chair Kehoe.
Here.
Trustees on the Board of Retirement, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Oakham,
Here.
Mr. Harris, Mr. Moore, Mr. Robbins, Ms. Gray, Ms. Zapanta. Trustees sitting on the Board of Investment, Mr. Kelly,
Present.
Mr. Jones,
Here.
Mr. Green.
Here.
Thank you, Ms. Greenwood.
Here.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. Staff participating in the meeting include CEO Santos Kryman, AEO JJ Popowich, Interim Chief Counsel Johanna Fontenot, Chief Counsel Stephen Rice, Principal Investment Officer Jude Perez. The management team include Alan Cochran, Bernie Buenaflor, Carlos Barrios, Carly Natoya, Veronica Martinez, Kim Hines, Kathy Delino, Semi Wong, Ceslo Templo, Richard Bendel, Tamara Caldwell, Irvin Wu, and Vincent Lim. Bob Schlofat, our CISO, is also participating, and Admin Service Analyst Kaylin Ung. Trustees, at this time, if you have any comments or questions on any of the items, please use the Zoom chat option to be placed in the queue. And at this time, we ask all meeting participants to mute their mics until you are ready to speak. In regards to the minutes, we do have a motion by Mr. Bernstein, seconded by Ms. Greenwood. So at this time, I'll go ahead and take a roll call. Mr. Santos. I'll come back to you, Mr. Santos. Ms. Greenwood.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you. Ms. Greenwood.
Yes. He's
Thank
on
you.
mute, Bonnie.
Thank you. Ms. Gray.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Knox.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. Bernstein.
Aye.
And Chair Kehoe.
Aye. Great. Thank you,
Thank you.
Bonnie. That passes.
Passes unanimously.
Perfect. We will go on to item 3, which is public comment. If we've received any requests.
We have not.
Okay, that brings us to item 4, which is a recommendation by Ms. Hines and JJ Popowich regarding a discussion of the fiscal year 21-22 preliminary budgets. I know that we have a presentation, so we'll go ahead and proceed with the presentation. And if there's any questions that pop up during that presentation, please please leave me a note in the chat box. And if you would like to interrupt to ask a question, please say so in the chat box. Otherwise, I'll hold your place towards the end. And I will turn it on over to you, JJ.
Thank you, Chair Kehoe, and good morning to all the trustees. We are pleased to present to you the proposed fiscal year 2021-22 budget. This is the official proposal budget. Last month, we brought to the committee a preliminary budget, and we sought your feedback and insight into that budget. And you provided that feedback, raising some very good questions and raising some very good points as well. And so this proposed budget is the result of listening to those questions and, of course, looking at the preliminary ideas that we presented in the last meeting. This budget is based on a careful look at the organizational needs and what we need to make sure that LACERA continues to operate and meet the promises to our members. It is based on a careful review of the legacy strategic plan, the 100-day roadmap that our CEO, Mr. Kryman, presented to the boards last year. Based on all of the feedback that we got and looking at our preliminary budget, we decided this year to take a little bit different approach to this budget proposal. Included in this budget package, you will find a number of memos that are based on our interpretation of your questions and the feedback you provided that take a deeper dive into a series of those questions. So those memos consist of a connecting the dots memo, which is a look back at the legacy strategic plan. We call it the legacy strategic plan because it was passed in 2017 and subsequently reaffirmed in each of the budget allocation decisions since then. It was rolled over from year to year. A look at that 100-day roadmap, and then of course a look at some of the operational needs that meet our mission. That memo also contains a strategic planning and budgeting framework memo, which demonstrates our commitment to a strategic planning process going forward. We'll talk about a little bit about that in a moment, but I do want to, as I go through what's in this package for you really quickly, I do want to recognize that this is a team effort. This entire budget and all of the ancillary memos that are included in it were developed by the management team. So in the connecting the dots, myself, Ted, Ricky, and Contreras and Vince Lim had a big hand in putting that together. There's a budget to actual memo, which talks about how we've done as terms of matching up what we've budgeted for to what we've actually spent. And I think there's a good story of improvement in that memo because this has been something that the boards has been looking for us to improve over time. And I think that this memo acknowledges that over time we've struggled a little bit with this, but going forward, I think we have a plan in place with the mid-year corrections, mid-year adjustments that we plan to do on a going forward basis that will bring us much closer together from the actual spending plan to the actual spending. So that's a great memo, and I want to thank Kimberly Hines and Kaylin Ung for working on that. The recruiting and hiring plan. We have heard over the years that our vacancies are more than we'd like to see at the end of the year, and so thanks to Dr. Natoya, our HR director, we now have a hiring plan schedule, and I think that's really key step for us to make sure that we are hiring the staff that we need, that you've approved for us to hire. And get them in place. And so that memo outlines what her hiring strategy is for the coming fiscal year. Then there is a memo for fiscal year 2020 CEM benchmarking report. This benchmarking report is something that LACERA has participated in for many years. And over the years, on occasion, we've brought it to the Operations Oversight Committee to talk about it. But this year, we take a good close look at it. A look at why we score where we score, some of the observations that we see, some of the things that separate us from others. And I want to thank Bernie for all his help in putting that one together. And Bernie's actually going to talk about, Bernie Buenaflor, our Chief of Quality Audit, Quality Assurance. He is going to talk about that a little bit in this presentation in a moment. And then there's a budget trend analysis from Richard Bendel and his team that kind of takes a look back at the budgets over the last several years and tracks how we've got where we are today and what's been approved over the years. So with that, if we'll go to the next slide, please.
JJ, before you go on, you had made a comment that in 2017 the strategic plan was passed. So that was a point of discussion from our last JOGC meeting, and it was unclear. So the strategic plan, are you saying in 2017 the strategic plan was passed by both boards or by the board of retirement, was an actual discussion and motion. I can't recall.
We've always historically, as far as I can remember, included the strategic plan as part of our budget package. And so that was the year that was the last year that we went through what our version of strategic planning was, which at the time was we would go to the offsite and talk about what our goals were and what we were putting forward. And then the actual strategic plan would be included in the budget package. And typically, this is how we've always looked at it, is when the budget package is approved, the strategic plan is also approved along with it. I can't remember, and some of the folks that have been here as long as I have can maybe chime in on this, if we've really ever taken a separate approach to approving just the strategic plan.
My understanding under Mr. Rodemaker at the time was that he would always present it as part of his evaluation period, and we would adopt his strategic plan and what things needed to be done. So that's going back as far as Rodemaker. As far as in a budget process, approving a strategic plan, those are two totally separate things. And as a trustee for 11 years, I don't consider approving a budget plan as approving a strategic plan. So that's new to me, that would be the thought process. I'm curious from legal, do we have counsel on? Because I'm curious if our board motions as they're written in the past for approval of the budget, if that would constitute acceptance of the strategic plan from a legal perspective.
This is Johanna. I'm online. You know, it would need to be separated out as a motion that is adopted for it to be. If it was part of the budget, you would want it to be separated out as a strategic plan that was adopted. I was reading the comments. Joe Kelly says he remembers both boards adopting it. Going back to 2017, I don't have a memory. I mean, I know that we go, like JJ said, offsite, we presented it, but I don't know if it was formally adopted.
Okay, so
I don't recall.
That's, I'll just point out that I in a current concurrence, I do believe that if we're going to talk about strategic plan, that it needs to be a separate item that we discuss and adopt. And that's definitely not under the authority of the JUGC to make that adoption. That would be a joint board decision. And it should be something separated out. And then as far as the strategic plan itself, that was a pending question from our last committee meeting, and it appears to still be a pending question. So I think that we, as an organization, are sophisticated enough to be able to find that answer. So I would urge staff to determine if the 2017 strategic plan was ever adopted, so that we can report that to the boards at the time of adopting the budget, because I think that's an important key element to address. So let's go ahead and proceed with the presentation. I'm going to point out that that I had seen that concern. The reason why I asked the question is when I'm reading this budget, I saw attachment A and attachment B. Attachment A is a 100-day plan that I don't believe has been adopted by the boards, and attachment B is the strategic planning process. And I want to make it very clear that from my perspective, that I don't think those items should be inclusive of the budget process for adoption. So when we get to that, I'm going to recommend that we separate those, and that's a separate discussion to the boards, and frankly, probably the board of retirement primarily. But in any case, let's go ahead and proceed with the presentation, and we can have those discussions once we get closer to making motions.
Thank you, Mr. Kia. I do want to say that that strategic planning framework is included as a sample of what we want to work on. We'll talk a little bit further in here about our plans for strategic planning. And I agree with you in a more in different the better way to do things moving forward is always to do the strategic plan first, adopt the strategic plan, and then build your spending plan around that. And we being myself, Mr. Kryman, and the management team understand that, and we're committed to doing that type of strategic planning process. So we just included that memo in there as a kind of like an overview of strategic planning, just to demonstrate we do understand the importance of it, that we're committed to it, and just as a sample. Of course, we will change that plan going forward as we have discussions with the board and formalize our strategic planning process. But we'll talk about that, I think, in a moment. So let's, I think from this point, we'll move forward. So budget drivers, we've kind of talked about this already. Obviously, our mission, our vision, and our values drive our budgeting thought process. The legacy strategic plan as it is, whether it was formally approved or not, we have over the years built our budget around what's in that strategic plan. And then the CEO's 100-day report, yes, we understand it hasn't been formally adopted by the boards, but it has influenced our budget proposal, and we need to recognize that. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So common themes outlined in the strategic plan are human resources and technology and disaster recovery. The human resources aspect is building a team that's highly productive, has the resources and knowledge that they need to fulfill the board's guidance and what we need to do on a daily basis to run the organizations efficiently and deliver the level of service that we need to do. The legacy strategic plan includes a number of technological goals that we've set for ourselves over the year, including case management, integrating disability retirement services into our workspace management system, building a quality control system that's more tight and managed, among other things like launching LACERA.com or revised LACERA.com. All of those were part of the strategic plan, including the case management project, which is linked through various, if you look at the strategic plan, there's various different goals, which all really essentially speak to a case management system. And then disaster recovery and business continuity. Those are all parts of that legacy strategic planning. From the 100-day report, we have done some operational improvements and reorganizations, and it talks a lot about an administrative infrastructure that we need to move the organization forward, which we have talked to the boards about over the last several years. Actually, I think we've talked about certain things like needing budget software and so forth. So let's go on to the next slide. So speaking of the strategic planning cycle, and as I mentioned in there was a memo on a strategic planning framework. The cycle as we envisioned it, and again, this isn't set in stone. This is just to give an idea of what we might do with a strategic planning cycle. And I think it's important to talk about it here because it's important, as we go forward for how we're going to build budgets going forward to understand what we're going to attempt to do in the strategic planning. I will acknowledge here, and I'll mention it again in a moment, we do plan on issuing an RFP for a strategic planning consultant to help us create a sustainable strategic planning process that takes into account best practices and as well as fits LACERA's needs. But in the general view of things, we'll select that consultant hopefully in July of this year. By August, we should be entering into the planning phase where we should be reviewing, or we may choose to, depends on what we all agree upon, looking at our mission, vision, and value statements to make sure that they're still relevant, and because those things drive how we look at LACERA and how we plan to meet our commitment to the members. Yes.
You have a question from Mr. Kelly.
Yes, Mr.
Yeah, I
Kelly.
do. So JJ, thank you for this. Thank you for everything. But I did have a question. Your document does speak to the need to undertake a new strategic planning cycle, but it also references what I believe is an ongoing IT strategic plan. Can you expand on that for me? Because quite frankly, I think the IT part of the strategic plan is the most important part of the strategic plan. And if that's already underway, I was a little bit confused then about this other strategic planning cycle.
Thank you. It's a good question. I'll talk about this one for a moment, and then I'll address
That's fine.
Yeah. The strategic planning cycle that we're talking about here is all encompassing of the organization, which would include a IT strategic plan. So you would build your right, and in fact, we kind of do this today. The Board of Investments has their own strategic plan. Retiree Healthcare would have their own strategic plan, the way we've done it in the past. All of those really would feed into this larger strategic plan. So these things have to happen simultaneously and consistent on a regular basis, because you would build in what IT intends to do and take that into account on what you're going to try and accomplish for the overall strategic plan. So I hope that answers that.
It does. I would caution that that even if there's being work done on the IT strategic plan, that it be looked at afresh as part of the strategic planning process. And the reason I say that is, and I know we're going to have a separate brief discussion on the CEM report, but there are real significant issues, I think, from an IT perspective for LACERA to consider, and for the boards to consider, particularly the investment in IT that we will make in future years. And just to wrap that in, you haven't had the participation of the consultant in that process, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of value for conducting the great majority of that strategic planning process in IT, for IT, under this larger strategic planning cycle.
I agree.
Chair, can I make a comment?
Yes, I have Mr. Bernstein
sorry.
also in the queue, but let me just check with Mr. Bernstein.
I'm fine hearing from our CEO first, not a problem.
Yes. So I just wanted to echo what JJ is saying, that we do believe that the organization needs to go through an overall strategic plan that is that we can all provide input on. Now, in terms of the IT strategic planning, I think it was important to point out that, we had to make a lot of decisions during COVID that had to do specifically with how we have our architecture built and the infrastructure built, and we had to make some decisions. And so the way it's structured now is that the IT strategic planning process is a subset of the overall, and I agree that we need to look at it from an overall picture. So what we've done is we've allowed the IT, or we're going to use the IT, and we're going to provide workshops over the next few months with the Board of Retirement, so that you can see how things are laid out, what sort of structure we're talking about, and how it's going to relate to the future direction of the office in terms of how we're going to provide service. And what we're looking for is flexibility in that plan, so that we can move quickly on specific initiatives that we think are important for us to provide the service to our members, and to secure the data, and to make sure that we have an IT environment that is going to withstand any cyber attacks and so on and so forth. And so it is a subset, but we had to work in advance because of the strains that the COVID pandemic had placed on our system. So, if things had been normally phased, it would be in sequence, and we just kind of had to move this up quickly to address some concerns that we had. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, Mr. Bernstein.
Thank you, Chair Kehoe. Thank you, JJ. I mean, we're in the conversation, so we're in it. I do philosophically agree with Mr. Kehoe that the strategic plan and budget should be separated out. However, I also want to state, and we can discuss this or clarify it, I think some of these items are not JOG-C items. I think a number of them are BOR specific items. And I think there is a disconnect. The Board of Investments has a very robust and ongoing strategic planning process around things like asset allocation. It's going on. Some of these things are, to my mind, very specifically BOR. And I'm even going to ask, given the timeline and given the fact that the BOR has not had a conversation yet about adopting a new strategic plan, and given the fact that we have time to get it in, that we look to the June 2nd BOR admin meeting to at least agendize starting a conversation, because if we're going to be doing RFPs starting in July, I just respectfully to the JOG-C don't know that I believe that all of these items are JOG-C items, and the BOR has not started this conversation yet.
Yep, and I think a good point of we should table those kind of key elements until the end of the presentation and then get into the meat and potatoes. I don't disagree. I pointed out earlier that I think that some of these items are clearly BOR items. So I definitely agree with you on that one. So let's let staff continue with the presentation on the budget itself. Let's have a hearty discussion about the budget, and then we can discuss how to carve out some of these other elements as well.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Keogh. And I just wanted to say that the only reason we included all of these other things here is because specific questions were raised in past meetings, and we wanted to be able to answer them. We do understand 100%. A lot of this has to be discussed and gone through in the appropriate committees, Operations Oversight Committee and others. So we didn't, this wasn't an attempt to circumvent that process in any way, shape, or form. It was a means of answering questions that had come up related to the budget proposal. And so I just want to set that out there. We do understand there is a place and time for going through it. I won't go through specifically, month by month what might need to occur, but we just wanted to give you an idea of what a strategic planning cycle would look like. Jim, do you want to move on to the next one, please? So in terms of looking at key areas that are addressed in the budget, upcoming budget, human resources is one of them. I wanted to sort of put some side-by-side comparison to what had been accomplished so far. We've done we've got our new HR director, which was key to us being able to move forward. And Dr. Nantoya has done, as far as my view, is a terrific job of getting us on the right path. We did do the organizational realignment, which was part of the 100-day roadmap, and it was necessary, we felt, to do that to get the vertical business alignment going, so that the divisions that work together are together under a single hierarchy of management. So essentially, you've got now the member operations group, which is member services and benefits and disability retirement services, all of those member-facing operations that interact with our members. And then you've got the administrative group, which focuses on all of the support functions to make sure that everybody can do what they need to do. We did bring on board our Chief Information Security Officer and develop an info security team. There's more work to be done there. Eventually, hopefully the goal will be to consider them moving into a unique division of their own, reporting up to the executive office so that they have independence and can be like a check and balance to make sure that we're all following the expected security policies, procedures, and that we're following best practices. We established a PMO, which is a project management office within the IT area, so that we can start making sure that we have applied project management skills and direction to make sure that we can now start to carry through in all of the various goals that do wind up being approved by the boards and by management. If you look back at strategic plan, things tended to go on for years. that we rolled over. And we felt that if we try and focus and create real project plans for these things and move them forward, that hopefully we'll be able to get to move them along a little quicker. This year, of course, we still have to resolve some of the issues we have with the county regarding the non-ordinance positions. We now have a HR recruiting plan, and we are going to stick to that recruiting plan. We will be bringing on a new core training class, and hopefully your boards will approve some additional staff in the retirement benefits area to be included in that class. We'll have the class either way because we have vacancies that we need to fill. But we're very excited to do that. We missed a class last year because of COVID, and that has had and is going to have an impact on our service levels until we can get back on track. And then, of course, the critical IT positions that we need to bring on board to continue moving LACERA forward and continue our investment in our IT functionality and structure. Let's go on to the next slide. So IT Infrastructure Information Security Group, IT Council, these are things that we're looking at continuing and focusing on in the coming fiscal year. Again, we have our CISO, we have our security team, and I've talked about some of the plans we plan to do that. We have our project management office. We have safe and secure remote capabilities, which we needed to do because of COVID. COVID taught us a lot and opened our eyes about things that we needed to do, and we had to pivot really quickly in order to be able to service our members. And so we did that rather successfully. We now have safe, secure remote capabilities. Our staff has been able to work remotely. Productivity is coming up and improving, and we are providing the services to our members. We also created our virtual service platforms this past year, which have been very well received and something that will continue on in the future years. I listed the PMO on the fiscal year 2021 and 2022 side because we need to expand that. The nice thing about the project management office and what I consider to be its counterpart in the benefit side or the operations side of the house, the process management group. These are inclusive groups that are project-based. And by inclusive, what I mean is they involve the stakeholders in developing the project plans and the needs of the things that we're working on. So we get a more well-rounded view of what we're trying to accomplish, the problems we're trying to solve, and how we're going to solve them, and to make sure that the end users and the member experience is always taken into account. And that's something you'll hear us talk about, I think, a lot more in the coming years. The member experience. It's taking a step and making sure that we're looking at everything that we do from the member's point of view. So that means that when we design new processes, new procedures, new business rules, they have to be compliant with all the laws. They have to meet all of our values. They have to be in line with what the board's guidance and oversight provides us. But we also have to take into account of how that looks to the member and what experience they go through. It needs to be understandable. It needs to be accessible. It needs to be timely and to meet their expectations. And so you're going to hear a lot more about member experience. But having this inclusive project-based approach to the projects that we do in LACERA, I think is going to have a huge impact on improving the eventual outcomes that come out of all the investments that we're making. Include change management control, because we now have a change management control process. It's part of the IT Council, which takes a look at things, IT perspective, projects and things like that before we move forward. Make sure that everybody, again, it has an inclusive look at that. It makes sure that we consider all the angles of that, legal, security, every single facet of what those projects might be, and gives an internal approval before we move forward with that, or before we present ideas to the board if they need to be board approved. I think we're going to see, and we're looking at this, a focus on automation and service, which I kind of talked about. We have significant backlogs throughout LACERA, and part of that approach to fixing that is we need to automate, not just making self-service options available to our members, but also internally how we do work. We have to rely more on automation, more on programmed business rules and automated processes from a systems perspective to be able to be more efficient. And that's a necessary thing that we have to do, and I think we're committed to doing that moving forward. There will also be a telecommunications upgrade if the budget is approved. We have an aging call center system that needs to be replaced. It's not really conducive to remote working capabilities. So from a disaster recovery and a business continuity process, it wasn't operational. And that's why we had to switch to the cloud-based service that we have now. But we need to have a permanent solution for that. And there's a lot of things that we can do within the telecommunications side of the house that will improve our ability to service members, make it quicker, faster, and more secure. So we look forward to doing that. And there are discussions of that in the budget package that we've put forward. Let's move on to the next slide. So disaster recovery and business continuity, if there's anything that we've learned this past year, this has to be always at the forefront of what we think about and what we're planning to do. So, you know, from the business perspective, from the historical perspective, we now have an updated business continuity plan that is continually updated on a regular basis, and a very dedicated group which is focused on doing that. We did our first business continuity disaster recovery plan test in years. We, as you can see on the future side of the house, we are planning to do those on a regular basis and have two coming up this year, this coming fiscal year, which we're trying to get done. COVID-19, it was a little bit of a rough start, but I think we responded tremendously to it. And I am extremely proud of every single person at LACERA for their efforts as we pivoted to doing things differently, being innovative and finding new solutions to service members. And you know, we also experienced civil unrest last year. Hopefully we won't see any more of that. But we did develop a plan for that. And you know, we developed plans for that, for pandemics, for earthquakes. There's a whole series of plans that the business continuity planning team has developed and is continuing to develop. So for our coming year, we're proposing some cloud migration to make ourselves more sustainable in the event of a disaster. One of the items coming up is discussion about moving our mainframe to the cloud. So that's a critical business disaster recovery aspect. And so we'll be looking at more of those things to make sure that we are flexible and can continue to operate when time needs. And we're looking at improved remote access. We have safe, secure access now, but there's improvements that our business, or excuse me, our systems team is looking at that will make it additionally secure and make it easier for our staff members to use, a more seamless environment for them. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So the operational improvements, you know, one of the longstanding goals that is on the legacy strategic plan is the case management system. And your boards have supported that. And we are now in the process of doing vendor evaluations of different vendors that might come in and help us provide a unified case management system. This is real, measurable progress on one of the outstanding goals that has been around for a while now. Metrics 101. One of the things that we need from an operational perspective is to understand how we are doing business today, and having metrics to tell us that so that we can make really data-driven, informed decisions about the proposals and budgeting that we want to do for the future going forward. You've got to have metrics. And if you're going to make any improvements in how you're doing business and how we're working, you got to have metrics to tell you what we're doing. And so we now have them. It's version 101. There's a lot of room to grow, but it's a phenomenal effort put forth by our staff on the system side and on quality assurance and benefits and the managers that have worked to support that. The document and certificate upload is an accomplishment from last year. It goes along to making things sustainable in a pandemic and also for service improvements. We used to require members to submit original certificates, original birth certificates, marriage certificates, domestic partner certificates, death certificates. These things, most of those things have high value to members. And so we used to require them to submit them, the originals, and then we give them back to them. In a pandemic environment where you couldn't have the same staffing levels to process incoming mails, that became a problem. And so we now allow them to do that with an attestation. Document uploads. Members can now upload documents to us instead of sending them in to us and then processing them through the image process. Over time, these will have efficiency improvements. We've talked about our paperless initiatives in the Operations Oversight Committee. So we're moving forward, and those are accomplishments because now we've got opt into electronic communication for our members, real service improvements. Going forward, this year, there's budgets. We're asking for budget to support the case management system implementation. We are going to be looking hopefully at expanded online self-service as part of the IT strategic plan that will be discussed. Process improvements for death claims are coming. We have a huge backlog of, we have a somewhat of a backlog in our death claims, and we've looked at that process and how do we improve it. So we're going to revamp our death claim process to make it more efficient and faster. And then, we're launching LACERA.com, so we'll have expanded retirement, university, and virtual services. The virtual services that we had to roll out as a result of the pandemic, our virtual member service center one-on-one appointments, are extremely well received by members, and we look forward to continuing that. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So from an administrative infrastructure side, I mentioned it a little bit earlier. We are going to be putting out or asking for support to put out a RFP for a budget consultant to come in here and help us redesign our budget process. Right now, the budget process, what you see before you today, takes countless hours of manual labor to put together. So a lot of it's borne by Kimberly Hines and Kaylin Ung, our budget team. It's built on a series of Excel sheets and reports that have to be, migrated into those Excel sheets. It's not efficient. And so it's time we feel to have somebody come in and help us revamp that and select a budget software. And that budget software also allow us to do a lot more forecasting, what ifs, and it will improve the things that we bring towards for the board to look at. We are asking for support for a new contract management system. We built a homegrown system. We've had some experience with it for several years now. It's not meeting our needs. And so we are asking to put in place a new contract management system. It will automate things better. It will make our ability to comply with contracts and track contracts a lot better. And that will be tied in hopefully to an automated payment system, which we're focusing on. A new travel management system. We're asking for funds for that so that we can make travel management more efficient and a better way to track it and see what we're doing, the better way to generate reports and making sure that we're adhering to our travel policies, travel and education policies. We are looking for some support for administrative case management system. So we have a case management system focused for the member side of the house. But an administrative case management system is a way for us to track and manage all the different internal projects that we do internally in support of everything. So everything from procurement to longer term, larger infrastructure projects. We need a better way to manage and track that and make sure that we're adhering to it and staying on track. And that's what the administrative case management system would do. And then, as we mentioned, a strategic planning consultant. We had our own homegrown version of strategic planning. And we all recognize, I think, at least on the management team, speaking with the management team, we need to have a more formalized strategic planning process. I think, your boards have been asking for that. The best way that we can deliver on that and make sure that we have one that's sustainable on an ongoing basis and takes in all of the information that we need to take into and at the time we need to do it, and make sure that we're able to connect it to the budget. We need some outside assistance to come in and help us do that. We collectively have not gone through a very formal, written down, thought out strategic planning process, other than what we've come up internally with. That served us then. We need to improve and do better going forward. If we can go on to the next slide, please.
AJ, I had a question on this slide.
Yes.
So you're talking about budget software. And so my question is, what about accounting software? Because usually for agencies like LACERA, they would buy an accounting and budgeting software package. It struck me as odd that you're buying just one. And why are you not also looking at accounting? In other words, if budgeting is Excel software based, I don't know what your accounting package looks like, but it's probably not much more sophisticated than that. So can you talk a little bit about why you're just buying a budgetary software and not looking at a more broad package that would give you both actual expenditure accounting or revenue and expenditure accounting as well as budgetary?
So we're actually better off on the accounting side. We have Great Plains, which is our accounting software, and
they don't have a budgetary component?
They may be one of the vendors that we go for.
I see. Okay.
I don't want to front run that because I'm not sure whether they would meet our needs. I can tell you we did look at a series of budget software companies, and there's a lot out there which is just a tremendous improvement on what we have, and that would integrate with Great Plains. Everything has to integrate with Great Plains. That's
important information. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we're also looking at some automated payment softwares. All of those three components will all work together and be completely integrated. So whether it's a module we get from Great Plains or it's a module we get from one of these other vendors that we may select, we'll see what that is. The point of bringing a budget consultant was to make sure that we're designing a budget that follows best practices and is up to date and a process that can support that. And part of what we'll ask that consultant to do will be to look at all those different software packages with us and help us make a decision on what's right.
And then my comment is, I would ask again that staff always define acronyms. On the previous page, you talk about a case management system, and then later on talk about CMS. I knew the connection, but I don't know if our members who are interested in this material would know the connection. So I think it's really important we don't forget that these are public documents that the public may want to look at.
Very good point. You're absolutely right.
And JJ, this is Keith. Just one quick comment on the budget consultant. And we don't need to do a deep dive now, so it's more of a placeholder, is just what role the trustees will play and the boards will play in that process in terms of when you say how LACERA can build its budget and best practices and measuring against other entities. I think you'll probably hear later in this conversation things that are of key importance to trustees and how we can better get the information we need to evaluate the budget through whatever software package you wind up getting.
You are 100% correct, Mr. Knox, and that will be part of the process because, we can't, whenever we talk about budget, we can't talk about a budget without talking about trustees. You are the guidance, the oversight for what we do, and you need to have the information you need from us to be able to make the informed decisions, give us that guidance, and approve our budget. So absolutely, we will include the trustees in that process.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up, I'm going to turn it over to Bernie Buenafor, who is our Chief of Quality Assurance. And just a little bit about what Bernie's going to talk about real quickly is, and why Bernie's doing it. The CEM cost efficient management benchmarking has always, has traditionally been managed, or the relationship has been traditionally been managed by our quality assurance division. And so they've been working with these reports for a very long time. They used to, when we did provide regular reports to the trustees through the Operations Oversight Committee, it was the CEM, it was the Quality Assurance group that brought those forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Bernie, and Bernie's going to talk about just an overview of what we see in the CM report and what makes it what the differences for LACERA are, and maybe some ideas of how we might move forward. So, Mr. Buenafor, it's all yours.
Thank you, JJ. Good morning, Chair Kehoe and members of the boards. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share with you the CEM benchmarking report for 2020. In last month's meeting, there was interest expressed in reviewing this report to see what kind of insights we can bring to the budget and strategic planning initiatives of LACERA. So what I would like to do is highlight some of the themes that the management team was able to glean from the data in these reports. The reports focus on two main areas. One is service to our members, and the other one is cost-efficient management, whether we're delivering that efficiently. And you will see where we stand and where we rank relative to our peers. And it's important to understand who our peers are. There were 72 funds that are typically measured by CEM. But of those 72, they group them into peer groups. LACERA's peer group consists of large statewide funds, including CalPERS, CalSTRS, and other state funds. So even though we're a county fund, because of the size of our membership, we're classified in this group. So there's a clear disadvantage in terms of economies of scale. So we're one of the smaller funds there. That's going to play a role in how much our cost is. Also, we actually have more active members and retired members and less inactive members. And that's significant because there's more activity related to these two groups than for the inactive groups, logically. Another thing is that, and this is where LACERA is completely the leader of the pack, and it's that LACERA spends more staff time with its members and more staff time serving its members, even in the back office. So that's also significant. And as a result, we spend more on staff and professional services. As far as the service score, because of all that time we spend, we have one of the highest service scores. And it's also reflected of the impression that our members have of us, because there is a survey that CEM takes of membership from all the peers, and they factor that in. But it's interesting, and I'll show you in the next slide, that our service gains over the years, there is a narrative that explains the trajectory that it's been taking, and I'll go into that a little bit. Also, another significant theme in the CEM reports is that LACERA's IT investments is different than our peers in terms of the proportion of costs per member. And that'll be an interesting analysis. So let's continue. Next slide, please. All right, so let's start with the service scores. You can see the dark line is LACERA. The light blue line is our peer group, the 16 or so funds. And the green line is all of the people, 72, all of the funds, 72 funds in all. You'll notice that LACERA is ahead of the pack or above everybody else clearly when it comes to service, and that's primarily because of the amount of time we spend on the phone and in one-on-one counseling with our members. But you'll also notice that the other funds have a relatively steady incline or increase slope over the years, pretty steady. LACERA, it's odd because in 2013-14, we had this steep incline, then a steady decline, then in the last year, another incline. And let me explain what's going on here. In 2013, 2014, we were rolling out new technology for customer service. We had, for example, the automatic online scheduling software. We were implementing call center technology. We were enhancing some of our web portal functionality for our members. So as that rolled out and members started to engage that technology, there was a steep incline. Over the years, though, we experienced shortages, significant staff shortages within the front office, member service center and call center. And as a result, the satisfaction level tended to descend. Then, ironically, in 2019, 2020, it turns again. And why is that? Well, ironically, COVID-19 allowed us to showcase some new technology. Okay, for example, members could now upload documents automatically. There was more self-service options on the web portal, and we innovated with Zoom online chats with our members to counsel them, and that went over very well with our members. We also enhanced our member authentication process online. And so all this given together, combined with the fact that we spend a lot of time with our members, helped us turn that curve. So that's the service story for LACERA. Next slide, please. Okay, so how does CEM rank us? Well, obviously LACERA is the head of the pack when it comes to one-on-one counseling. But cost-wise, there's a challenge there. We have an economies of scale disadvantage. LACERA is in Los Angeles, a very high cost environment relative to some of our peers. Our community has a growing appetite for public service. So that is reflected in the rise of the membership, which then translates to a rise in LACERA's costs. We spend a lot of funds in our front office processing transactions. So this is going to be a key factor here. We actually spend a lot of staff time in actual processing transactions compared to our peers. And we also spend a lot of time in professional service, and you'll see this mostly in the disability area, where we have lots of lawyers and doctors that are involved. But here's another thing. Relative to our peers, we tend to have a slower pace of adopting cost-saving technology. That's interesting, and we'll get into that a little later. Finally,
I have
yes.
a question from Mr. Jones.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah, it's just a little bit of a comment as I read through the document, and I appreciate your narrative with it. One of the things I just want to let you know that I think probably one or more of the listeners on our side, as you're listening to this, I've heard you say, and I've read it, that our members like a lot of time being consumed, and you're connecting that to the service outcome. In my experience in working in customer service operations environments, it's not so much the time. Actually, I just want the task to be done. If it takes a lot of time, then okay, it took a lot of time. I did enjoy it, but if you can help me get it done shorter, it's even all the better. So I just want to make sure, because it sounds like there's a level of conviction internally that the amount of time is what's driving the satisfaction up through there, and that's not been my experience professionally. But I just wanted to kind of put that out there, because I know it seems to be a significant part of the narrative for kind of explaining some of the high touch, high cost things that have happened previously in that standpoint. So thanks, Chairman, for just a chance to kind of add to the record there.
Thank you, Trustee Jones. Actually, I couldn't agree with you more on that point. What I'm describing at this point is a little bit of the historical perspective. This is a point of view that LACERA has maintained for many years. And part of the story here, part of the theme here is that now is a time for us to transition, I would say, to embrace technology more, because of the fact that not only could you have great customer service, but you could also have efficient customer service at the same time. There doesn't need to be a trade-off. That's the realization that we now have to accept and embrace going forward. So I agree with you totally.
And context, I think, is also important, because, for an example, I know our members actually do want a lot of time when they're doing their retirement counseling session. So if it's their final, this is the final time that they're sitting down with LACERA and they're going over their numbers and they're making a life-altering decision, then they do actually like that extra time. But when they're calling to talk about a quadro, they want to get off the phone as quickly as they possibly can, right? So I think context is important, and maybe for Mr. Jones' point would be maybe surveys of members to see what they actually like and support. This is outside of a budget context, but might be something for staff to look at and say, what do the members want on this? Because I think we'll see that the majority during our final year retirement counseling session wants that personal time, but outside of that, they just want to get on the phone and get off the phone. So those are just an important point to bring up. And then I do have a queue here. So I have Mr. Kelly, followed by JJ, who wants to add some information. And then I have Mr. Bernstein.
Yeah, thank you. I do think this is a really important topic, but I don't know if it's appropriate to discuss as part of this briefing. And I say that because it's very meaty. It also tends to be focused on areas that are more under the jurisdiction, if you will, of BOR rather than BOI. And I also think that we should remember that we are just a subcommittee here. But I think this is important information for all trustees, even if the decision making is under the responsibility of BOR. So I don't know how long your presentation is, Bernie, but and I'm fine going through it if it's short, but if it's longer, I would propose it be moved to part of a joint board meeting for all members to be educated on. I thought it was a really important report. I thought your memo was very well written as well, by the way. But I don't know to have a lengthy discussion in this meeting about it.
I can be brief.
Perfect. And let's go on. JJ did have a comment that he wanted to add.
Yeah, I just thank you, Mr. Kehoe. I just wanted to add a little bit to the discussion that you had kind of indicated, and that is there's some context which has to be taken into account for how our members view LACERA and what they expect of LACERA. So, Mr. Jones, you're right. For a lot of the simple transactions, and even though they may not be simple on the back end, purchases, changing, account maintenance type things that they want to do, let's just get it done, right? I'm gonna tell you what I want, do it, get me the contract, sign it, initiate it, get it over with. There is, though, elements of counseling in that, because before somebody chooses to make a purchase, for example, they want to know what the result of that purchase is. And they may want to know how they're going to be able to pay for it. And so those conversations take a little bit longer. And a lot of times what we'll see is people will want multiple cost estimates. Well, what if I just buy 5 years? Or what if I buy 2 years? Or, what if I buy it now and buy some now and buy some later? And then Mr. Kehoe hit the nail on the head. During the retirement planning process, it's akin to, but not financial planning. Because we don't take into account, obviously, the financial planning aspect of, all of somebody's assets and how that all figures into it. But for most of our members, the retirement benefit they get from us is their future income. And they'll supplement that if they can with the 401ks and the 457s and the other benefit plans that they can purchase and invest in. But LACERA is the bedrock. And so there is and the future benefit for all of their survivors. And so that is a lengthy, on average, 1 hour conversation with members, and it's driven by the member, and the members rely on that and love that. So you're absolutely right. We can improve a lot of places and be a lot quicker. Some of it, and this is where the high touch cost comes in, is spending that time, which is what the members ask us for.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I appreciate the follow-up there. What I was just talking about was kind of like the mentality behind it, and I appreciate that, Bernie, and I've read through the end of the document, so I wasn't trying to pin you down on an early assessment. I do think the omni-channel, I mean, that is 2021, right? Like that's what everyone thinks about. There is a certain segment of all the activities that is deservedly high touch, and it should be. But there's also a lot of activity that, depending upon your mindset, you might still view as being essentially high touch when actually it's not, right? And it's ripe for automation, and it's ripe for self-service and a bunch of other things of that nature. So I was just appealing more to the kind of early caricature, and again, appreciate Bernie, because I did read to the end, of the mentality that kind of took pride in saying, well, we like spending all this time with the people, and I'm just saying the trends around customer service are overwhelming from an ROI perspective and from a customer satisfaction standpoint. Is I only want the high touch where I want it and need it, and I want you to be patient and not rushing me in time. And there's a lot of other things where I didn't think I could do it automated, but you made it so simple by designing your website. I actually prefer it.
Yep.
I don't want to go to a teller anymore. I can't remember the last time I talked to a bank teller, right? I don't anymore. So, all right. Anyways, I appreciate it. I'm sorry, Bernie, go ahead with your flow. So.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Or
I did have Mr. Bernstein in the queue.
Bernie, this is great information, and I really appreciate it. It's literally or figuratively catnip for trustee discussion. However, this is entirely a BOR conversation, and I am concerned because in presenting it to the JOGC, I think there's going to be a feeling that we've presented and discussed this information. I have a fairly long list of BOR trustees who aren't here today because there is no requirement that they be here today. This is excellent work and fascinating, but we have to bring it to the BOR or to one of our committees on the BOR, because how high tech, high touch we are in delivering customer services is not, it's budgeted through the two boards, but it's not under the purview of the JOGC.
Thank you.
So excellent work, but we need to bring this to the BOR.
I do agree, and I was reserving my comment, but I mean, we're an hour and 10 minutes into it, and we haven't talked budget yet. So I think that we definitely need to. There is the strategic element of driving the budget, but I think now we're going overboard, and it's all strategic, right? So really, the strategy needs to come from the appropriate boards. So the Board of Retirement, Board of Investment, depending on which element. And then staff then develops the budget based upon that. In the budget process, we don't need to be talking about strategy because that strategy should have already taken place. So, I do totally get that the board is shaking the bushes here, and we want this new process in place, and it's going to take some time for staff to get it in place. And I'm sure that next year is going to be an amazing year when we sit down and talk budget. But I do want to point out that an hour and 10 minutes into it, I haven't even seen a dollar figure in front of me. So let's please continue on and keep that in mind on this. So let's please proceed with the presentation. Let's see if we can get into the meat and potatoes on the budget.
That being said, there are quantitative numerical questions that I have arising from this report. I'd rather let you get through it, and the information is fascinating. I agree with everything Chair Kehoe said, but I will sort of reserve the right to come back with a question or two. about how this impacts the numbers that are being proposed, but I'd like to get to that before I jump in with that.
Would you like us to move to the budget part of it, or would you like Bernie to complete what he put together? Either way is fine. I certainly understand.
I would like to go to the budget.
Then I'll just maybe start off by asking my philosophical question about how this report impacts the budget, which is, I think the information is excellent. It's really interesting and desirable information. It suggests that one of the reasons that we are a more relatively expensive fund to operate operationally than some of our peers is because of automation and technology, and yet we are proposing a lot of new positions, and I'd like staff to talk to how you reconcile this report, which seems to be saying that we aren't automated enough, but a budget proposal that seems to be focused on increased staffing. I just want to understand the philosophy better before I support the budget.
I can answer that question if I may. What we're at is at a crossroads, and in the crossroads, what we've got to do is make sure that our vehicle continues to run until we're able to upgrade. So right now we're in a position where we definitely need some maintenance of that vehicle, and that comes in the form of adding the staffing, because our business model is dependent upon staff being there. But at the same time, we want to initiate that transition, a transformative technological change, so that the way we do business in the future will be different. So this is sort of a crossroads. We need to keep the vehicle running, but at the same time, we need to consider automating the vehicle like a driverless car, so to speak, right? And so there's going to have to be a period of time where we're phasing out the high investment in staffing, or reducing that, while at the same time phasing in the infrastructure for automated technology. And that's what we're facing out.
And that's an excellent answer. I appreciate it. But maybe you or JJ or someone can then clarify. It seems to me that we are proposing largely indefinite employment. And to some degree, what you're describing is a transitional challenge. I thought your answer is excellent, but if you could help me further by clarifying why, and if I'm reading it wrong, I know it's not fun to correct a trustee, but please correct me. But it seems like we're largely proposing indefinite solutions to what you're describing quite well as a transitional challenge.
Can I answer that question? Yeah. So I think that that one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that bringing an individual on board requires a great deal of training, which is very expensive. And we will deal with the staff are coming in permanent through attrition. So we've taken a look at our staff, and we believe that eventually through attrition we'll be able to right size in terms of the human capital better. But at this particular point in time, the cost of training an individual, it doesn't make sense, in my mind at least, that we would use that time and that expense for a temporary employee, because we can always move individuals into other areas of the business, and we can train them to do things to fill gaps that we think are needed to be filled. And so that's one of the areas that I think is really important in terms of this budget, where we're trying to fill specific operational gaps that we've identified because of COVID issues, because we believe that we can provide better service to our members. And so that's the focus of this particular budget. In addition to that, the transition that we're talking about is really a strategic question that we all have to have as part of the strategic planning process. And how much self-service do we really want, and how much high touch do we really want? And I think that right now, like Bernie said, we're at a crossroads. We're at that point in time where we have to make these decisions, and we're going to have to talk about the sort of investment that we're going to have to make on the IT side, because our budget in future years is going to increase because of that investment that we're going to have to make. But we're at that crossroads right now, and the high cost of training staff to do this work, because it is at the front end and it is member service related, is one of the things that we considered when we made these particular requests. So, and I appreciate Trustee Bernstein that you know, we don't want to make a 30-year investment, right, when all we need is a 5-year investment or a 10-year investment in making sure that our operation continues to function properly. So we'll make that transition, and with your help and the rest of the trustees, I think that we're going to be able to do that.
And that's what's weighing on me, Santos. I hear what you're saying, but we are making a 30-year commitment, and the challenge is, like I said, it's hard to get people, but we need to hone our strategic plan, and the confidence that we can sort of rearrange assets, if we want to view human capital as an asset, down the road is, to me, a little complicated, because it's basically saying we're going to trust that we may not need them for what we're bringing them for in 5 years, but we can find something valuable. There's a bit of a gamble in that, but I also hear what you're saying. So thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay,
And let's move along into the numbers.
Sure, and I'll try to wrap this up right now, so maybe we can cut to the chase. Can we go a couple of slides ahead, please? Another slide and another. Okay, and another. Okay, so let's look forward now, because we understand what our cost situation is now, what our service model is now, but what do we want to do in the future? Well, what CEM seems to support is that, number one, we preserve what is best about LACERA's customer service culture, but we put the member in the driver's seat when it comes to how they want to receive the service that we give them. And we want to give them all the options that are available today, because over time, our membership is evolving. Okay, so their expectations of service is also evolving. It may be slower than the demographic of the overall population, but it is evolving. And there are two strategies that look like they would be important in the future. One is workforce optimization. That means we implement whatever tools, techniques, technologies are available and becoming available to help our workforce work better. Case management enhances teamwork. That's a primary benefit. Process management allows us to organize, to train, to provide tools to make us more efficient and to measure our efficiency. Quality assurance, exceptions handling, as automated as possible. And I would introduce account certification as something we need in the future, especially if we're going to go towards automation. These are things that we need to go go into. But most of all, we need to start opening up other options for our members so that they can conduct their business efficiently online, so that they have all the communication options they're interested in. And to do that, we need to build the infrastructure, which is the IT investment, as well as the expertise for it. So what we want to do is invest in a workforce of the future and start doing that today. So that's basically the major themes of CEM. If anybody has any additional questions, I can answer them. Thank you.
So I would like to ask that staff bring this CEM discussion back to the Board of Retirement. I think that a deeper dive at the Board of Retirement is appropriate. So I'll kick this to Chair Bernstein for that, and we can determine how best to proceed.
I would welcome a conversation about this, and Bernie, again, I think the information is fascinating and important. I really would value the opportunity to have all of my trustees able to consider this and weigh in. It's great information and great questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go ahead and proceed with the presentation.
So I'm going
Okay,
to, Kimberly, oh, there you go. Thank you, Kim.
okay, so moving on. Good morning, Chair Kehoe and members of the committee. So this slide basically describes our budget development process. You've seen it several times. As JJ first talked about, typically a strategic planning discussion is supposed to happen. We're working on making sure that happens in the future. The next phase is the formulation of their request, the executive office review of those requests, and then we present the preliminary budget information to the JOCC for review and guidance. After that, the budget hearing and then the budget adoption. So this slide just basically represents the typical budget development process. So related to this slide, I guess the one thing I just want to highlight is related to what decides how much money we can spend. So Government Code 31580.2 says that we can spend up to 0.21 of 1% of the accrued actuarial liability. So for this year, we can spend up to 164 million. Our budget request is 115 million, and which leaves us a contingency amount of 50 million, approximately 50 million. Okay. Numbers. Our administrative budget request is 115 million, and that is an approximately 15 million increase from the prior year and about a 14.5% increase. So specifically talking about, so it's broken into two categories. 9.3 million is for salary and employee benefits. 5.1 million is for services and supplies. Okay, so let's taking them one by one. Salary and employee benefits. The budget materials indicates that our request is a net increase of 15 permanent positions. The other part of the increase relates to full funding of vacant positions from the prior year. An example of that is a position that's already in our budget that we didn't put funding in. And so an example of that is the Deputy Chief Investment Officer position is already in our budget, but last year we did not put funding in it, funding for it. So this year we're adding funding because we plan to hire it. So that would result in an increase in money, but it would not result in an increase in a position. So another thing that affects our increase in salaries and employee benefits relates to step increases. When a person's not on their final, on the fifth step of their pay schedule, these roughly 5.5% are added every year to accommodate for that. The other component is merit increases for some of our positions that are entitled to a merit increase. Okay, so this slide is also included in the budget packet, and it basically outlines the different positions that are being requested from which division and a brief description of what the position is related to. Additional details related to these positions are included in the divisional sections of the budget. The highlight portion includes a justification of why the manager is asking for this particular position. So the increases are pretty much one or two spread out amongst divisions. The biggest increase is 7 positions for the benefits division. And as JJ mentioned earlier, these increases are related to the increasing workloads and the servicing, I guess, servicing our member, the delays related to that. So as I mentioned, the highlights for the divisions with the justifications, that actually starts on page 45 of the budget package. So moving on to our next slide. This slide represents the status of our vacant positions. The first column, the second column relates to the status of today's vacancies. And basically, we're just trying to give you an understanding of if our budget request is approved, what the vacancies will look like at that point.
Question.
So
Question.
JJ mentioned earlier.
Question from Mr.
Yes.
Kelly.
Yeah, Santos, is there a plan to disposition these not yet processed positions with the board of supervisors, with the CEO?
Yes, actually, we are planning to have a discussion with the Board of Retirement to discuss our plans moving forward on those positions in June.
In June? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I guess related to this slide, we did want to acknowledge the importance of the topic of vacant positions. It actually has been an issue probably for the last 5 years. And we realized that when there are vacant positions, it increases stress in the workplace. It reduces the ability to possibly get work done on time. And then it also sometimes can affect the quality of work that staff are doing. So we do acknowledge that it's very important, and it is considered one of the higher priorities within the organization to get these positions filled so that the workplace can benefit from that.
This is Keith. Can I ask a quick question? Is there a target vacancy rate? Because, you know, we're never going to be 100% filled with employees. We always have turnover, retirements, et cetera. You know, what do you think would be an acceptable vacancy rate?
Well, I think one of the,
Go ahead.
Okay, so I think that one of the directions should be making sure that some of the higher the higher number of vacancies in divisions are definitely addressed. And then off the top of my head, I would think maybe like a 10% rate would be more effective for keeping the organization flowing properly.
That's a good question. Is Dr. Natoya there as well? Because I think that could be an HR question as well. What kind of I'm curious what the industry standard is. We're not the only ones having to deal with a vacancy factor.
Right. Good morning. I would say that that's something that needs to be defined in our strategic plan, what an acceptable and target vacancy rate should be for LACERA. And I agree with Ms. Hines, 10% is usually the top number that organizations seek to have. So maybe somewhere between 5 and 10, depending on, our priorities based on the strategic plan.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Ms. Bernstein?
Just for some additional clarification, the 17%, 16% vacancy, do we have a sense or documentation on how much of it is being filled with temp work? How many are truly empty seats, and how many are seats that are occupied but not by our eventual hire?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Carly.
Yes.
Go ahead, Carly.
Okay, sorry. So that's an interesting question, and we looked at that. The only problem is there's not a match one-to-one. So our budget for temps is different than the budget for regular permanent staff. So to say that a temp is in a position doesn't quite match up position-wise or budget-wise, but we do have quite a lot of temps that are fulfilling the duties that would normally be fulfilled by a permanent employee.
So, Ms. Hines, this may be a question for you. Temps are an independently budgeted item. They're not they're not budgeted in the approved position?
So actually, we have two different types of temps. We have a category of agency temps, meaning we go out and find an agency. And then we also have temps that are considered county temps. So the majority of our temporary staff are agency temps, where we've hired.
Whenever you wish to get to it, I am just curious, and I so appreciate the clarification of actuals, but I'm curious how we spent 96 to 97% of our budget last year while having a 17% employee vacancy rate. I'm having a challenge. I appreciate the reporting of the two numbers, but I'm having a challenge in my mind understanding how that correlates. And if you want to get to that later, I just would appreciate some clarification on that at some point.
Okay, if I could add right now, actually in the salary and employee benefits category, it's permanent salaries, and then it's agency temp salaries in that. So when you get to the bottom line of salary and employee benefits, it's all wrapped up in there.
Okay. So it does get,
Yes.
there aren't two pools, it's one pool of money that we're spending out of.
And that's correct. And then a lot of times you'll see that we didn't spend our permanent salary money, and you'll see that we spent more temp money.
Okay.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a question, if it's okay.
Yes, Mr. Jones.
Yeah, Kimberly, in the net hires equation there, I know is the attrition that we're seeing, right? So we got people coming in, we got people going out. Is the attrition more willful attrition? Is it more, is it, hey, is it false positive? We hired someone and thought they would be great, but they couldn't quite cut it through training. Like in that net number, when you look at the attrition side of that, is there anything that we're missing on the front end in terms of the people that we're identifying to fill the seats that then end up leaving? Or are we just benchmark kind of normal where people just, hey, I thought this was something I really wanted to do. Turns out I don't want to do it. And then I leave. Can you kind of give me a little bit of sense of that net hire number? Why we kind of keep kind of barely incrementally making improvements in the net hire position relative to the attritions?
Well, I will actually start off, and then Dr. Natoya can add. This year for sure has been unprecedented with staff retiring and leaving. However, for the most part, my perception, and Dr. Natoya can answer, most people that start don't leave. So we don't have a problem with people starting and then all of a sudden leaving quickly after that. So the real issue is that staff are leaving, retiring, and we're not replacing them as quickly as we need to. And part of that was during the pandemic, we really had a challenge with getting the positions hired.
Okay, so it's willful separations more so than, okay.
Yes.
And then my question is, I think that there is a way to determine temps that are filling behind permanent positions. And I do think that that is an element when we're looking at the vacancy factor that we need to consider. Because if we have a straight 17% vacancy factor, you know, that's an issue, but I just don't see that, especially on the IT side. And a lot of these vacancies are on the IT side. I know for a fact that our systems division uses a significant number of temps. So I do, once again, it's sliding out of the JOG C and into the BOR realm, but I do think that when it comes back to the BOR, I will be asking that question. So I would encourage you to take a look at what temps are filling actual roles. And I understand there's periods where temps help for surge type things and stuff or specific tasks. Those wouldn't be calculated as filling a permanent item, but we should identify the ones that are helping fill permanent items so we can have kind of a true gauge on it. Because I would suspect that we're probably in the 10% range when we're looking at that. So I pass that back to staff just as a comment and future questions.
We'll do that.
Okay, Kim, back to you.
Okay, so
Oh, I have one question, Sean, just to build on yours. This is Ron Oakham.
Ron?
It would be nice to see, these 81 vacancy positions, and then we're talking about this next year, 21, 22, 96. What percentage of them are actually filled with temps? And how do you compare the cost of a temp to a permanent? So we can see what those costs are, how they're related. And it seems to me we have budgeted positions of 459. Okay, we got a vacancy of 81. We're going to have budgeted positions of 474. This thing's growing pretty rapidly. And, it seems to me that with all of the new systems you're putting in, our numbers wouldn't be going up down the road. They would be going down because you're going to have systems making things easier in accounting and all the other areas that we're going to be working on. So how do you explain that, JJ, or whoever can get into that kind of a situation?
So, so there was a lot there. So yes, we can certainly show, as we said, we will do the how many temps are filling these vacant positions. We can look at the cost comparison. I think we'll put that together probably for an operations oversight discussion, and then yes, over time we would expect the total number to either slow or go the other way through attrition, as Mr. Kryman indicated earlier. As we automate, we'll realize efficiencies, and we won't need as many people in certain areas. But that's automation like that, by the way, is not a flip of the switch. There's planning and time, and so some of this stuff can take 2 to 3 to 5 years to put in place, to where you'll start to see that efficiency gain enough where you wouldn't need as many people, and by then you'll have people continually retire out of the system, because as we pointed out when I think it was Mr. Jones asked the question, yeah, most of the people leave voluntarily on their own, most of them when they're ready to retire, or if they've found a great opportunity elsewhere, but most people stick around. So over time we should see this trend stall out or even begin to go the other way a little bit, but we won't know that until we can put the efficiencies in place and realize the impacts that we believe are there.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Question?
And then
So-
really quick, I do have Mr. Knox in the queue, so we'll do Mr. Knox followed by
Okay,
Mr. Kelly.
I thought I was before Mr. Oakham.
Oh, did you text me? I'm sorry. So I missed
I
that.
apologize for that.
Go ahead,
No,
Joe.
you're in the queue, Mr. Oakham. I was just before you.
Go ahead, Joe.
So
Joe,
let's go
Sorry.
with Joe and then Mr. Knox.
My question is, systems on this chart, this vacant position summary chart, systems, and we've all been talking about the focus on IT strategically. Systems is the only division that is facing a budgetary cut in positions. Are we sure about that? Is that the right move? Is that the best move? It does strike me as a little odd given our conversation.
So if I could answer that, Mr. Kelly, it's a very good observation. One of the issues that we face in systems is that we have so many vacancies. So our focus for the first 6 months of next fiscal year is to transition our temporary agency staff to those permanent positions. So, we do need additional positions, especially as we roll the information security group into their own division. But I want to take it in bite-sized pieces. So first, we want to focus on filling those vacancies and then going back and asking for additional positions as we need them. But it seemed ineffective to ask for more when we have so many vacant.
Okay, and then those long-term temps who are filling some of the 24 vacant positions, they need to meet the minimum requirements for the positions and competitively recruit for them, correct?
Absolutely.
You just don't slot them in there.
Absolutely. So I
Okay.
should rephrase that. Those agency temps, for someone who is more qualified, would fill the position, and then the agency temp would no longer occupy
Okay.
the position.
Thank you.
and I have Mr. Knox.
Yeah, just quickly for context, it's interesting. Treasurer tax collector is almost exactly the same size position-wise as LACERA. And we have 467 positions and I have 95 vacancies right now. So it almost is an identical vacancy rate. But my budget pressures are very different than LACERA's, and I have to keep probably at least half of that 95 just to create savings to offset other issues in my budget. So yeah, I'd be curious to see just how LACERA can, with its budget flexibility that I don't have, fill a lot of these. And one thing we're asked a lot on the county side is how many of these positions are long-term vacancies. So that would be something I'd be curious to see in the future, because I know maybe at the entry level you have some churn and some turnover where it may be different vacancies that are being filled, but you may have some that haven't been filled for a few years. And I think for context that would be helpful. So that was it, just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Ms. Hines.
Okay. Moving on to service and supplies. The increase in this area falls into three major categories. One is simple inflation. When a vendor charges more for something, we end up having to pay more. So you see increases related to that. In December 2020, we signed a new lease agreement for our office space, and that caused our rent to go up. And then lastly, a lot of the activities related to improving our technology and infrastructure. Those are the three key areas of why you'll see an increase in our services and supply request.
Can I ask a question specific on the category of miscellaneous? What is defined as miscellaneous? And I asked this because on in the budget itself, specifically for the BOI and BOR board budgets, there's a miscellaneous category that's went up like 1,000%. So I'm just kind of curious when we use the term account classification of miscellaneous, what is that?
So one thing, and it's from an accounting perspective that I know we need to change, our recruitment costs are included in that category, I believe. And last year we added a lot of money in that because we were hiring these high dollar positions in the executive level. So one thing that's in there is that, and it kind of distorts the fact that a miscellaneous category should not really have that, that much of a those type of expenditures in there. I need to try to figure out how to move it to another category.
Yeah, I mean, just as a example, the Board of Investments has a $66,000 miscellaneous amount that was previously last year $6,000, and the BOR has a $47,000 account, which is previously $6,000. So, when I'm looking at these from a budget perspective, it's tough to see what exactly we're intending to do with those monies.
And I believe that's related to off-site meetings off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. Okay, so moving on to just to highlight some of the services and supplies. I mentioned we have a $3.5 million rent increase. I know that sounds like a lot, but when we presented the new office space lease agreement, we did an administrative change of how we account for the fact that it's, an investment versus we're tenants. So as a result, our rent increased sizably. So actually in this year's budget is related to renovating our space. There's funds needed for furniture and technology. Whenever we renovate, we buy all new furniture and so $1.3 million is in the budget for that. Another increase for this year, $600,000 related to a new fee schedule for disability panel physicians. And as we've mentioned before, our request includes our desire to retain a consultant and to implement new budget software. And lastly, one thing I wanted to highlight was the $200,000 for phase 2 of the case management system for our member operations group. So, some of the highlights from the budget. I encourage you to take a look at the systems budget for different IT related projects they're working on, because there's more specific details about other projects that are going on within the organization. And let's see. Okay, so moving on real quickly to our retiree healthcare. The budget request is, let's see, 11.4 million, and this is $2.2 million more than last year. For salary and employee benefits, their request includes to increase our permanent positions by 6. And this also is to support an increased workload and service delays. So the other increases are the same as the administrative budget to fund vacant positions we had not funded before, and for things like step increases and merit increases. So most of the increases related to services and supplies relates to the cost for overhead when LACERA's operation supports the retiree healthcare operation. And so you'll see part of that is related to overhead. So I actually went over this slide already. And moving on to our OPEB, our other post-employment benefit costs. So the budget request for this year is $683,000, about $100,000 increase from last year. The majority of these costs are, again, similar to retiree healthcare, this allocation of the LACERA operation supporting the OPEB program. So moving on. Okay, so in this last slide, I just wanted to acknowledge that the budget team has been hearing you over the years, and we are moving forward to make adjustments to the budget, to include additional budget data, and to include a lot of data more upfront in the preliminary part of the process. As you can see in the budget package, there's a lot of data here, but I hear that you'd like to see like historical data up front. And so on page 11 of the budget, we attempted to include more of that, and you'll see like a 10-year history of our budget to actual expenditures, as well as information on like the number of positions we budget for over the years. We can provide any additional data you'd like. So in that, going forward, we're going to have a section in the budget just for historical data. And then actually, we're going to give that to you upfront at the preliminary process. So the other thing I know you've been asking about is the year-to-date expenditure information and projected spending data. And that, again, is in this package. And I realize we need to get it to you more upfront in the preliminary. And this data starts on page 29 of this.
Kim, can I just jump in just as a point of order on my behalf here? So unfortunately, I'm going to have to head out for a conflicting meeting. So I am officially passing on the reins to our very effective Vice Chair, Liz Greenwood. So she will be taking over the running the meeting going forward. And I appreciate, I'll just take this privilege to be able to say to all the staff, I definitely appreciate all the work, energy, and effort that went into it. I know that we have been asking a lot, and we're talking about fundamental changes to the way we do business, but this is all good stuff, and it's bringing us to the next level. So I appreciate the staff work in on that. And my only last request is, as this goes on to both boards for adoption, I would recommend that all of these various miscellaneous memos that were included in this packet be put together as a singular memo that is very, I would say, covers and summarizes all of the other memos, because it's a lot of material and it's kind of disconnected. So I hope that when it goes to both boards for formal adoption, we can have a singular memo that highlights overall points. That's all that I have to say, and I'll pass that on to Ms. Greenwood. Thank you again.
Thank you, Sean, very much. Have a good day. Good morning, everybody. Okay,
Morning.
take it over, Ms. Hines.
Okay, just a few more points. So the year-to-date expenditure information and the projection information starts on page 29 of the budget. And we will include that type of information up front at the preliminary stages. And then lastly, you've been talking to us over the years about a budget that more closely aligns with actual spending. We did prepare a memo that was included, not in the budget package, but a separate memo that you received as part of this process. And it is a budget to expenditure analysis. And in that document, we're describing a new strategy that we're implemented in order to ensure that we're not having these large under expenditures at the end of the year. And we're really optimistic that that change in strategy is gonna with the results we're looking for. And so lastly, from a budget perspective, related to the materials and presenting information for readers, we really are confident that we have quite a few vacancies on the budget team. We're confident that as we get these positions filled and as we implement the budget software, we really believe that we're going to be able to be more flexible and more nimble in our ability to deliver the information that's needed. So that pretty much wraps up our discussion about presenting the budget, and we are here to answer whatever questions you may have.
Okay, I have, thank you very much. This was an amazing presentation, and an incredible amount of hard work went into preparing this. Alan, go right ahead.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hines, you actually answered one of my questions, which I really appreciated, which was how much are we spending in rent? One other area that I know that from the memos we're spending more money on, and I'm wondering if you have any way of clarifying it or quantifying it. We have, it talks about how on the Board of Investments, we're trying to have more stuff brought into staff, which to me is an expense, but it comes at savings potentially on manager fees, which from a BOI perspective has been a desire of ours. Do you have any quantification? I just was curious because although it's an expense to me, it's not even truly an expense because there's such a great savings potentially attached to it.
And can you repeat what expense you're speaking of again? I'm sorry.
There was a general reference in one of the memos, and I apologize, I forget which one, to the fact that we're putting rent on the books, even though we're paying really rent to ourselves since we are our own landlord. There's in that memo, in that area, also a reference to the fact that the investment staff has been tasked with bringing more things in-house, and there are expenses attendant to that, which there certainly are. But since largely the goal of that is to lower some of our outside management fees, which is something we're hoping to do, it's really an offset expense. And I didn't, and if you don't have it, you don't have it, but I was curious, you quantified it about $3.5 million, our rent, which we're paying to ourselves. I see Jude appearing. Maybe you have some quantification that you can provide.
No, Mr. Bernstein, you are correct. It's not that our budget went up when we paid rent at 3.5 million. It was how we were accounting for it. So it was more of an off-book expense versus an expense coming off of the administrative budget. So the real effect to LACERA as a whole is net zero.
But it increases our number to just shy of 115. It would be 11.5 without that number, but we're paying it to ourselves.
Correct.
And I understood that, and that was very clear, and I appreciated that. I mean, I don't. That's a budgeting maneuver. I don't mind I mean, I don't know that I mind approving any of it, but I'm particularly comfortable approving us paying rent to ourselves.
And Mr. Bernstein, to answer your other question, a lot of the cost savings we've done, like bringing things in-house, those are also a lot of the fees we pay from investments you guys do see, and they are delivered to the board in December when we do our fee report. However, a lot of the fees investments pays to investment managers do not come out of this administrative budget. So Kimberly probably doesn't have the quantitative numbers, but you do see that annually as we present. I think it's Form 283. I may have it wrong that we do present in December, but we do quantify that in this office.
Okay. Well,
And Mr. Bernstein, from a budgetary perspective, the budget doesn't recognize any revenue or any savings of that type into our budget. It's really just one source, I think it's just a more accurate way of accounting for the expense, because it does increase on a budgetary perspective. When you do pay the rent, it does increase our overhead costs, for example, and that.
I don't know the history of how we got here, but in any traditional budget, it's sort of an odd thing to overlook something simply because you're paying it to yourself.
Yes, well, I agree. Budgetary, that's why we changed the accounting methodology. We thought it was important for us to recognize it as an expense in our administrative budget.
Great, and I imagine people have other questions, but I also, Kimberly, want to just reiterate this additional, and for everyone who was involved in putting it together, this additional information is specific and useful. It's really helpful. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Knox.
Thank you. Again, I appreciate the information today. Thank you, Ms. Hines, and everyone else that contributed to the presentation. My question is for Mr. Kryman. I know after you started, we basically did a rollover budget. You wanted to get your arms around things. Just at a high level, what are you particularly proud of in terms of the progress you've made on the budget? And then aside from things like the budget system that we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, are there any pain points or things that you're still, are a sticking point or issue for you?
Well, I think the thing that I'm most proud of is the willingness of our budget team and our staff to adapt to a new way of budgeting, and the inclusion of the mid-year budget adjustment, for example, is going to, I believe, pay a lot of dividends. We have deferred a lot of, not a lot, but we've deferred some of the decisions in terms of staffing to the mid-year budget once we have a better understanding of what our needs are going to be, and to address the positions that the Board of Supervisors have yet to process. And so I think that the information that we're receiving in terms of the estimated actuals are becoming more, there's more scrutiny to it. I think that the staff and the division managers have been engaged in the development of and explanations, quite frankly, of the budget requests, as well as the expenditures that they're having on a day-to-day basis. And so there's a higher level of accountability, I believe, that we've instilled. We still have the pain points are definitely the reporting requirements that we have, and the lack of the tools that our budget team has at this particular point in time. It's an incredibly manual intensive exercise to make any adjustments and to analyze things. It's no fault of anyone. It's just the way the system is just kind of grown. So those are the pain points. And I think that the adaptability of our staff, I think Kaylin and Kimberly have done a very, very good job of including more people in the budget process. JJ's done a good job of making sure that the MAC team understands the importance of the budget. And so I think that's probably the thing that I'm most proud of in terms of the budget. It's not a complicated budget. I mean, we don't have a lot of revenue sources. The expenditure side is really the challenge, and how we prioritize it. I think that once we go through the strategic planning process, we'll be able to align a lot of our expenditures with the future direction of the office. as the board sees fit. So those are the things that I'm most proud of, and those are some of the challenges that we have.
Yeah, thank you. And then I think the more data we get, as Mr. Jones was talking about, I think we can find a balance between the, the cost per engagement. We certainly want to spend all the time necessary to work with our, members, not just retirees, but I think there's certainly a balance, and maybe we can find some of that through the data. So thank you very much. And again, thank you too, JJ.
If I could just add to what Mr. Kryman said was, and I want to make just a real big distinction over the past is the amount of data that we're using to make our decisions is much better. So rather in the past, we made really good intuitive decisions, or the best intuitive decisions we could based on what we had, but we didn't always use the data. And so putting in place new metrics programs and really asking the managers to, when they come to us, present something to us, to bring us the data to support their request. I think that's something that we're really proud of as well.
Okay, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I had two comments. The first is I want to be I think we should all be sensitive to the fact that there's a lot on everybody's to-do list, and that hit me reading through the materials. And I just want to make sure that staff don't get burned out. There's a lot going on, a lot of special projects, a lot of initiatives, and this is all on top of their regular day job. Now, you on the other hand, you hear from us, do. But I do ask that you be sensitive and also communicate to us if there is if we're pushing too hard and if staff is feeling it, because I think that didn't come up today, but I think we always have to be sensitive to that, and I think we should be. The other thing is, I don't minimize the amount of effort that went into this because it was significant, but I do think we have to think about the information that comes to trustees as part of this process. So I read through 712 pages of information. And at the end of the day, one of the key charts to me was a chart that showed me that the agency's actual expenditures doubled over a 10-year period. Other information that showed me we haven't invested in technology to the same extent our peers have. And I don't know why that is. And I don't know why we aren't in a better position in regards to some operational efficiencies or our ability to retain and develop human capital. And it's those kinds of really big points that I would have appreciated be thought of or consolidated or presented in the 712 pages of information, because I think those are the questions that trustees ask, and those are the we put the data points together that other people may not. We look at things differently than other people may not. So I would ask that as we go into the next cycle next year, that we think about the information that's presented on the budget to trustees, because I think it has to be presented in more of a way that aligns with the responsibilities of trustees and is not as voluminous that I felt smothered, quite frankly, at times by the 712 pages. So those are my comments, but thank you all very much. It was a really good exercise. I also appreciate very much all the follow-up to the questions from the last meeting as well. Thank you.
Okay, that is it on my list of people that have questions and comments. Have I missed anybody?
Madam Chair,
yes,
may I make a motion that this committee recommend the budget to be submitted to both boards for approval?
You certainly may. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. Any comments? All right, seeing no comments, could we call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Santos?
Yes.
Miss Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Bernstein?
Aye.
Vice Chair Greenwood?
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously by all trustees present.
Wonderful. Are there any items for staff review?
Yes, there's several items. The committee requested that acronyms be defined in future budget material, as well as being provided detailed information regarding vacancies. The trustees also requested that they be involved in important elements they would like to see when staff moves forward with a budget consultant. The CEM benchmarking and a presentation of the start of the strategic plan process be agendized at future board meetings. And lastly, that all supplemental memos be combined into one memo highlighting the important points when it goes to the boards in July.
That sounds complete. And we are now at good of the order.
Great. So I will go ahead and call each trustee present. Mr. Santos.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the staff for all the work that you have done. Tremendous amount of material, as Mr. Kelly said, for us to review. But we got through it, and we have another opportunity to review it again at the joint board meetings. Thank you very much, and everybody has a wonderful Memorial weekend.
Thank you, Ms. Gray.
Joining Mr. Santos' comments, it was a great job done. And yes, we did get through it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knox.
Nothing. Have a safe, happy Memorial Day weekend, and certainly want to remember those that sacrificed their lives in the service of our country. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, everyone. I just want to remind everyone that our statewide vaccination rate for COVID still hovers right below 50%. So if you get vaccinated, you can maybe win $1 million or $1.5 million, whatever the new price levels are. But let's not forget to get vaccinated and encourage all the people we know to get vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Bernstein?
I have no comments. It's all been well said. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Oakham. Okay, Mr. Jones?
Sorry about that. My dual monitors things was messing around. Just wish everyone a blessed Memorial Day weekend. Thanks staff for all that information. It made for a good few days of chart reading and analysis. And I look forward to the larger conversation, particularly on technology. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for LACERA and the strategic planning process. So thank you again, JJ team.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Just thanks again to the staff for all their hard work and the heavy lifting done to make the presentation such a success today. Appreciate it. Great job, Liz, chairing the meeting. And go Lakers, go Dodgers. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Okay, Mr. Popovich.
Thank you. So I want to thank the team that put all of this together, and thank the trustees for listening to it all. Also, the question came up earlier, and we didn't have the succinct of answers. I gave my impression on the connection between strategic planning and the budget, and we have some crack team work behind the scenes to go back and look at.
Hold on, Zoe.
To go back to the record to see what the connection was. And the last time the strategic plan was approved was in 2017. It was on the recommendations from the Operations Oversight Committee that the board approved the proposed retirement benefits strategic plan and for fiscal years ending 2018 through 2020. And so it was done in that manner and addressed in that manner. So that's it. Oh, and yes, go Lakers. We're almost there for this series.
Thank you. Johanna Fontenot?
No, I don't have anything. Thank you.
Mr. Kryman?
Yes, I just wanted to thank JJ and Kim and Kaylin for all the wonderful work that they did, and the rest of my staff as well, division managers and their staffs. I think they did a wonderful job. I apologize for a 712-page submittal. I think the thought process behind that is we wanted to be responsive to all of your questions that you had at the prior meeting. So in the future, we will endeavor to distill all that information. I think we try to do summary. We try to summarize all of the salient points in the.
And 711 doesn't count as an improvement, Santos.
We're going to do a you know a look through and make sure that we have a document that's that summarizes all of the information that we discussed when we go to the Board of Retirement and to the Board of Investments. And so I believe that I did want to make one correction, Mr. Kelly. You had mentioned to me about the positions that were in question with the Board of Supervisors. We're going to go to the joint board meeting on that particular issue because it's a joint board issue. So that's scheduled for June 16th. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that to you. And I just wanted to say that you know, the budget process I think is moving along very, very well. Like I said before, I'm really happy with the effort that my staff have made. I think once we get the tools in place and the new budget system, it'll be a lot more. It won't be as less stressful, but I think that the duration of the stress may be compressed for our staff. And so I just wanted to thank all the trustees for your patience and for your thoughtfulness in terms of reviewing the budget materials and the questions that you all had. I know that we have to break some of the pieces out and go to the Board of Retirement. And I'm sure I'm going to have a really good conversation with the board chair about that after this particular meeting. So thank you all very much and enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. And we will see you soon.
Thank you. And lastly, Ms. Greenwood.
Thank you very much. I really first want to thank staff. We have a budget that is larger than most municipalities. And on top of that, you incorporated very numerous in-depth questions from our meeting a month ago. So I view the size of this presentation not only as exceptionally thorough and complete, but as a cautionary tale to board members for the questions that they ask for more information and follow-up on. Because if staff has demonstrated nothing, it is that they will do their best to provide that to us. This was a Herculean task, and I want you to know that I recognize that, and I'm quite grateful for it. And thank you, David. It was all I could do when Sean left, not to say there was a new sheriff in town, but that was pretty much all I had. I hope you all have a lovely Memorial Day weekend. I wanted to mirror Mr. Knox's comments that you know, I hope we all spend a moment thinking about the people who have given their lives so that we could continue on this incredible experiment that we are all on. And again, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.